I'm Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr., and this is how to get your money right.
The formation of the Freedmen's Savings and Trust Company, or the Freedmen's Bank, was a bold idea for its time. January 1865, the end of the Civil War was imminent. A group of white Northern abolitionists and business leaders met in New York to explore the formation of a permanent bank to help African-American Civil War soldiers and the African-American community. For the first time in their lives, newly emancipated men and women needed a safe place to deposit their money. On February 13, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln signed a bill making the formation of the Freedmen's Bank a law. 37 branch offices in 17 states and the District of Columbia were opened. Most depositors were low-wage earners, butlers, maids, cooks, and soldiers. But African-American churches, schools, and other groups also put their money in the bank. Depositors also included individuals who had been free long before emancipation. It is estimated that over the 9-year length of the bank, approximately 100,000 individuals and institutions opened bank accounts with deposits totaling more than $57 million. That's the equivalent to $115 billion today. During its first 5 years, Freedmen's Bank operated as a well-functioning institution. However, an amendment to the bank's charter led to risky asset investments. This, along with a lack of proper oversight, led to fraud, mismanagement, and abuse. In 1874, Frederick Douglass was recruited to serve as the bank's president. He believed that the failing bank could be saved and even invested his own money to revive it. But these efforts came too late. Freedmen's Bank closed its doors June 29, 1874. When it failed, depositors lost their savings. It was a bitter conclusion to such a promising venture. Despite its tragic end, the Freedmen's Bank represented the dreams for equality and inclusion in America's economic mainstream.
Dr. John Hope Bryant, what drove you to see the economic piece as a major driver for social change, not in America, but throughout the world?
Now you know I'm a math guy, so I like accurate numbers. So we've helped, as you say, thousands and tens of thousands in the place we're at now, which is the city of Atlanta. But we actually have helped more than 4 million globally in the work since I founded it.
4 million.
4 million plus. And we've invested $4 billion US since our founding. So we're the largest community-based investor in underserved neighborhoods. So in some ways, it's finishing what the Freedmen's Bank started in 1865 with Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass.
So I want to make sure that our audience understands when they hear the terms freedmen, when they hear the terms of what happened in Savannah, Georgia, when General Sherman signed these papers of 40 acres and a mule.
Yeah, Field Action 15.
And then what happened? Obviously, those that were enslaved after the Emancipation Proclamation, something happened. They didn't get the 40 acres and a mule.
Right.
Tell us what is relevant today with the term freedmen's and the fulfillment of those promises made but not kept.
Well, look, the backstory is that there were some ministers who were asked, what do you want after slavery? So they said, we want land. We want to do for ourselves. And so these folks said yes to that. That land was from North Carolina all the way down to what we call North Florida. And they worked that land so hard, that first 1,000 people worked that land so hard, they said, my God, they're so industrious. Give them a mule. That was like saying, give the farmer a tractor. It wasn't charity, it was an investment. So you had 40 acres and a mule. That was January 1865. And in March 1865, Abraham Lincoln, inspired by another pastor out of New York, a black pastor, who created the first Freedmen's Bank and who inspired Congress and us, thus president, to bake that into the Freedmen's Bureau, there came a bank called the Freedmen's Bank, March 3rd, 1865, chartered to teach freed slaves about money. That's our financial literacy circa 1865. And then President Lincoln made the mistake of promising blacks the right to vote. And Booth said, that's a bridge too far. It's the last speech you'll ever give. And he was assassinated the next month, April. And luckily, there was a businessman who had freedom. All money is freedom. There was a businessman who had the freedom to do as he liked. And that man who owned $6 million worth of real estate in today's money in Baltimore, Maryland, rented it out to working class blacks, was a guy named Frederick Douglass, who we know to be an abolitionist. So this has been, our journey for, ever. And unfortunately, when Lincoln was assassinated, and by the way, that bank was located across the street from the White House. And as you know, you're a genius of Washington, D.C., is proximity.
Yes.
Proximity to power. So you can put important things in Virginia and Maryland. I mean, the CIA is in, outside of the Beltway. Congress is not next to the White House. I mean, it's important. There's a lot.
Is that property still identified as Freedman Bank's property?
I don't know if this is a trick question, but I think I'm the only American that triggered the renaming of a building on the White House campus, and that was a building across from the White House, across from Treasury. It was called Treasury Annex Building. That's where the Freedmen's Bank was located. And if you look at it today, it's called the Freedmen's Bank Building. I bugged the Secretary of the Treasury, Jack Lew, so much, and his African advisor, Wale Adeyemo. I bugged them so much in 2015. They said, if we don't change the name of this building, this guy's going to wear us out every day. So they changed the name of the building the attorneys actually said that you couldn't do it. They said, John, who do you think you are? I'm an American citizen with an idea. And I said, well, how do you know you can't change the name of the building? Have you checked? Well, it's got to go through the Historical Society and Congress and the Senate. I said, have you checked? We'll be back at you. And they came back a few weeks later and said, actually, you can change it administratively. Secretary of the Treasury can change it with the signing of a pen. So I looked over at the Secretary of the Treasury and I said, Mr. Secretary, you cannot possibly tell me that the U.S. Treasury Annex Building is a sexier name than the Freedmen's Bank Building. You change the name. That's what it is today. Great. And so that building across from the White House, across from Treasury, was proximity to power. Lincoln could go upstairs, look out the window, and look at his greatest experiment since on the other side of the Civil War, which was really putting blacks in a position for self-determination. Land, access to machinery, access to capital. I think that people now are realizing that you cannot be the largest economy on the planet where 70% of people live from paycheck to paycheck. And it's not just now a poor person's issue. I mean, half of those making $100,000 a year, Dr. Chavis, are living from paycheck to paycheck. So I think the best way to solve a problem is when people are looking at it and seeing themselves.
You mentioned the term access to capital. Tell us how vital that is. And of course, now if you go to New York, there's a whole group of people called private equity.
Yes, sir.
Private capital.
Yes, sir.
So talk to us about...
And you were an advisor to the top black in private capital in 1985, Reginald Lewis.
Yes.
You were one
first
of the
black billionaire.
First black man to do $1 billion deal in Wall Street. $1 billion in 1985 is $20 billion today.
Reginald F. Lewis.
That was a baller. That was a original financial gangster. That dude was bad.
Brother from Baltimore.
Bad. From Baltimore.
Went to HBCU.
Yeah.
Virginia State University in Petersburg, Virginia.
And you were his spiritual advisor.
We would work very close.
You were at his bedside when he passed away, I understand.
Yes, I was.
And when you were locked up in North Carolina, I believe it was.
The Wilmington 10.
Yeah, the Wilmington 10. As I understand it, there was a bail that was put up, and Reginald Lewis was so brilliant. This speaks to capital knowledge, speaks to financial literacy, which is a form of capital. Reginald Lewis, as I understood it, analyzed the bail money and found out that the $500,000 was invested bail money by the state, and he demanded that the state share the profits of that with the church.
That's correct.
I mean, that's gangster. When you're being run out of town, get in front of the crowd, make it like a parade.
Well, knowing how the structure is structured, knowing the importance of capital, we live in a capitalist society.
A capitalist democracy, actually.
Well,
first corporation. The first democracy was a corporation. It wasn't not the other way around. It was all of these companies from Britain and Europe who came here and Spain and every place else.
Well, the thing that holds our democracy together is supposed to be equal opportunity. We're supposed to be moving toward a more perfect union. But a lot of times, as you know, economic questions sometimes it's not on the table. The economic question is not even discussed unless there's some tragedy. Then temporarily, there may be some charitable, some philanthropic response, but not the kind of sustainability that can create real change.
Malcolm X said we've been bamboozled, we've been tricked, we've been fooled. This is one of those times. No different than the blacks and the whites who are getting along together and were pitted against each other. No different than the fact that most organizations today fighting for social justice were created by blacks and whites and Jews together. But now somehow we're pitted against each other as if we're supposed to hate each other. The Bible says, as you well know, a house divided cannot stand. You're the pastor, not me, but you'll correct me if I'm wrong. The reality is that money has always been around, but we don't understand it. People like when we don't understand it. They prefer we spend it, but not save it. But the capital question you just asked, you asked earlier ties into this because it's about knowledge capital. It's about, yes, financial capital. It's about, yes, access to capital. You can't build a community without without backing, financial backing. You cannot build a community, I'll say it, without banking. There are no billionaires without leverage. Let me rephrase that. There are no people who became billionaires without understanding good debt, leverage of capital. So
good debt, most people think that all debt is bad debt.
Oh, that's wrong. Good debt is attached to something that might appreciate, and you build wealth in your sleep. So this building, commercial building, is good debt. A home is certainly good debt. Number one way you build wealth in America is home ownership. But 41%, 44% of black folks own a home.
Homes appreciate.
They appreciate in value. Now, somebody's watching this will say, aha, we got them. There's been several recessions and I lost my rear end buying a home. You should have sold. Because the history of real estate in the history of the world is that real estate has never depreciated in value. It's never gone down. It goes up, it hits a dip, a recession, it dips, and then corrects above the line. It dips, corrects above the line. It dips, corrects above the line.
So
all you have to do is hold on.
So geometrically, there's an incline.
By the way, stock market also. All you got to do is hold on. Buy it now, because when you buy it, you're writing off the depreciation. You're getting the appreciation, the increase in value for the real estate, and you're going to get the mortgage payment back in a tax refund. Hello. So even the payments you're making, you're going to get back at the end of the year a tax refund. 20 or 30 years of a mortgage payment is tax deductible.
Why isn't financial literacy mandatory in the public schools?
Because teachers and principals and most legislators are also financially illiterate. And that's not a diss. It's just 70% of this country.
Yeah, but the financial literacy is so key to success. Look like it would be in the interest of the economy and the interest of the democracy for not only K through 12, but in life. We should be discussing financial literacy, not just the terms, but understanding the importance of the interactions.
So you're asking some very deep questions. I'm gonna try to give you some serious answers without overclocking the audiences. I want to make the audience remain optimistic, but you've gone in this country from bad capitalism, you've gone from oppressive capitalism, slavery, to bad capitalism, Jim Crow laws, discrimination, separate and unequal, right? And unfair capitalism that meant, well, things like the GI Bill, which benefited 99% of white returnees from World War II who became homeowners. That's where the birth of the modern middle class came from, the GI Bill post-World War II. And I would like to think we become more enlightened. So as capitalism and democracy has refined, I think that people now are realizing that you cannot be the largest economy on the planet where 70% of people live from paycheck to paycheck. And it's not just now a poor person's issue. I mean, half of those making $100,000 a year, Dr. Chavis, are living from paycheck to paycheck. A third of those, hold on now, throw it on your chair, a third of those making $250,000 a year are living from paycheck to paycheck. So I think the best way to solve a problem is when people are looking at it and seeing themselves. So now, I mean, most Americans don't have $400 for an unplanned event. It's a problem for everybody. I'll put it another way. Now my rich friends know, my rich friends eat my poor friends to do better if only to stay rich. My rich friends need my poor friends to do better if only to stay rich. We're all in this thing together. So now, unless you want a circular firing squad, we all now realize that demographics are destiny. 40% of all people in this country now are people of color. So you can't just be rooting for white people's success, right? There's not enough of college-educated, successful white men to grow the GDP, the economy, for the next 30 years. That's not a racial comment. It's not a political comment. That's not an emotional comment. That's math. We got to realize that actually an educated population is how we all win. And so I finally think that there's a moment now with this period I call the third Reconstruction, where we're going to talk about, for the first time, not red or blue politics. Thank you for all your work, bipartisan matter. Not white or black race, but green. You hate a rigged system. If we can unrig the system in your mind, if we can give you your financial literacy, if you can show you the ladder of prosperity, we allow you to be successful too, then maybe you want to now celebrate success and aspiration as we used to in this country. We want to see people successful. We should want to see people do well and want to emulate it. We've got to return to that in this country, and it should include all of God's children.
It's been 60 years or more now since Dr. King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech on August 28, 1963. Part of that speech had an economic agenda. What is it that we need to do better at to make sure that there's more equal opportunity, more access to capital, more financial literacy, more engagement, more people getting themselves out of poverty?
I think financial literacy is a civil rights issue of this generation. I think that we're figuring out that we're better together the hard way. I think that the civil rights movement was about access to a good job, access to public facilities, access to political position, access, of course, to the ballot box. And thank God for the civil rights bills of that day that provided that access. And Dr. King died. People don't know the fourth civil rights bill was an Open Housing Act. Again, more about access. The civil rights movement moves us from the streets to the suites. The civil rights movement tries to reclaim the mantle of 1865. We have the 1865 project we've launched recently at Operation Hope.
That's going back to the Freedmen's Bureau.
Goes back to the Freedmen's Bureau and the Freedmen's Bank to pick up that mantle and finish that unfinished work, flowing it all the way through the civil rights movement. So freedom, first Reconstruction, access, second Reconstruction, opportunity for all, third Reconstruction. In the third Reconstruction, to your question, we got to start writing checks, not just cashing them. We've got to become committed to what I call K1 wealth creation, not just W2 income. So K1 is what Wall Street understands. That's what private equity understands. Those are folks who don't want a paycheck. You know, it's really this fascinating thing about politicians in Washington saying the rich are not paying their fair share and the rich need to pay more on income tax.
Well, that's what Bernie Sanders says.
Bernie Sanders may need my financial literacy course because the rich are just sitting there saying, knock yourself out on that message. I don't have income. The rich have income. The wealthy do not. If you're rich, you have a good salary. You can define rich. Depends who you're, are you making $100,000 a year? In the South, you're rich. You're making $250 a year, $100,000. On the coast or Mug, you're rich. That's not rich. I mean, that's not wealthy, but that's rich. That's an income. That's economic activity flowing through your hands. You build wealth in your sleep. That's called capital gains. So while we're arguing about people, rich people, with wealthy people who have $1 million net worth, $10 million net worth, 20 million, 50 million or more, saying they should pay more in income tax, which is 38% or whatever it is, they're not getting a paycheck. Their employees are. They're benefiting on asset appreciation, and that tax is 20%. They're like, knock yourself out on. That's why Warren Buffett or whoever you want to talk about pays less in income tax than the secretary. What you hate is a system that you think is taking advantage of you, because the secretary has a paycheck, and the asset owner is getting what's called K1 proceeds, or they're getting equity, which they may or may not ever cash out. This is getting deep in the weeds, but my point is, we should all be celebrating success. Like, but folks don't understand the economy, and they figure, like, I'll go to a church, and I'll get a black church, and I'll give a speech, and I'll say provocatively, "Now I got you all excited now. You hate rich people, don't you? Yeah. You hate rich people, don't you? Yeah. No, you don't. You hate rich people until you become rich. What you hate is a game system, but you don't understand the system. You think, I'm smarter than this person over here, and they're succeeding, and I'm not, it must be rigged. You hate a rigged system. If we can unrig the system in your mind, if we can give you your financial literacy, if you can show you the ladder of prosperity, and we allow you to be successful too, then maybe you want to now celebrate success and aspiration as we used to in this country. We want to see people successful. We should want to see people do well and want to emulate it. We've got to return to that in this country, and it should include all of God's children. Andrew Young would say, to live in a system of free enterprise and not to understand the rules of free enterprise must be the very definition of slavery. So if you go into an underserved neighborhood, black and brown urban or white rural, here's what you see. Check casher, next to a payday loan lender, next to a rent-to-own store, next to a title lender, next to a pawn shop, and a church down the street, try to make you feel a little bit better once a week. People who you and I care about are in a surviving mentality, Dr. Chavis. They're not broke, they're poor.
So you've seen movement. People are able to increase their credit score if they follow the advice.
This is social justice through an economic lens. The beautiful part about this is we're teaching you how to fish at scale. You have control of this. I can't control whether some person calls you a bad name. I can't control whether somebody likes you or respects you or not. We can't get in their heart and change how they feel about you. But I can get in your head and change how you operate about you and and as a result of that, what your credit score looks like. We move your credit score up, your debt down, your savings up. So the bank says yes. So the bank says yes. We're getting the bank out of the no business, I'm sorry you declined, and back into the yes business. So you become a homeowner, a small business owner, entrepreneur, pursuer of your dreams. That then allows you to become an asset owner that I mentioned earlier. 44% of black people own a home. 76% of their white counterparts own a home. That difference of 20, almost 30%, that's a wealth accumulation gap that's available to everybody to solve for. Half of black folks have a credit score below 620. Not poor people, everybody. And my poor white brothers and sisters are no better. So if you want to go to see a neighborhood that we both think is a problem, whether it's white, rural, or black and brown urban, it's a 580 credit score neighborhood, Dr. Chavis, that has a check casher.
So neighborhoods not only have a zip code, they also have a credit score.
And a character, and a culture. And Andrew Young would say, Ambassador Andrew Young, Dr. King was on that balcony when he was assassinated. Andrew Young would say, man who built this city, only international city in the South, 10th largest economy in the country, he built this city. Andrew Young would say, to live in a system of free enterprise and not to understand the rules of free enterprise must be the very definition of slavery. So if you go into an underserved neighborhood, black and brown urban or white rural, here's what you see. Check casher, next to a payday loan lender, next to a rent-to-own store, next to a title lender, next to a pawn shop, and a church down the street, try to make you feel a little bit better once a week. People who you and I care about are in a surviving mentality, Dr. Chavis. They're not broke, they're poor. There's a difference between being broke and being poor. Being broke is economic, being poor is a disabling frame of mind, a depressed condition of our spirit, and we must vow never, ever, ever to be poor again. We've got to move people from a surviving mindset where you're an expert in what you're against, and you don't like success, and you don't like rich people, and all this stuff we're talking about. And politicians, some, are preying on people who are depressed. I'm not going to name names, but you can probably figure it out. And as a result of that, certain people are now rioting at the ballot box because they're angry that success has not come their way and then somebody must have stolen it from them. No, we just need to give you a solution like we're talking about now. We need to move those folks from a surviving mentality, Dr. Chavis, to a thriving mentality. That's the middle class. And then a winning mentality, which are builders of industry, communities, organizations, churches, movements. That winning mentality is what makes America truly exemplary in the world. We don't have enough of this, and we have too much of that.
So John Hope Bryant, you're not only keeping hope alive, you're making hope thrive. Thank you so much.
Honored to be with you.